My name is Mirabelle Hayes, and 2 years ago, I walked into Viridian Dynamics like I believed in the future. I carried a leather satchel heavier than my student debt, a resume polished until it shone, and a quiet conviction that if I worked hard enough, played fair enough, and stayed loyal enough, the system would reward me. I was 29, raised in Toledo by a single mom who cleaned offices at night so I could attend state college during the day. I didn't have connections. I didn't have an Ivy League name on my diploma. But I had grit, and I thought that mattered. It didn't. I climbed. Not fast, not flashy, but steadily. I took on extra projects no one wanted, stayed late without complaint, mentored new hires even when my plate overflowed. I believed in the work. Viridian wasn't just a tech firm. It promised innovation with integrity. That phrase was stitched into the lobby rug and printed on every onboarding packet. I repeated it to myself like a prayer during all-nighters and cross-country flights. Then came the Horizon Project. It was Viridian's moonshot, a climate resilience platform designed to help cities prepare for extreme weather. I led the data ethics team. My job was to ensure the AI models didn't reinforce biases against low-income neighborhoods. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. And I was good at it. Too good, maybe. 3 weeks before launch, I discovered something. Buried in the code logs, tucked behind layers of obfuscation, was a backdoor. Not for hackers. For Viridian's own sales team. They built a feature that allowed them to quietly downgrade risk assessments for cities whose mayors happened to be campaign donors to certain senators on Viridian's advisory board. In plain English, they were making vulnerable communities look safer than they were, so contracts could be signed, kickbacks smoothed, and quarterly earnings inflated. I brought it to my boss, Martin Croft. He'd been my direct supervisor for 18 months. Silver-haired, sharp-suited, always with a paternal smile that never quite reached his eyes. I laid out the evidence. Screenshots, timestamps, internal memos. I didn't accuse. I presented. I asked him to escalate. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair, steepled his fingers, and said, "Mirabelle, you're brilliant. Truly. But you're seeing shadows where there's only sunlight." I blinked. "Sir, this isn't shadows. It's code. It's real. Ethics," he said, with a sigh that sounded rehearsed, "is a luxury startups can't afford once they go public." He stood, walked to the window overlooking downtown Chicago, and didn't turn around. "Drop it, or you'll find yourself on the wrong side of integrity." I didn't drop it. 2 days later, I was called into HR. No warning. No performance review flagged. Just a sterile conference room, a box for my things, and a termination letter citing restructuring and strategic realignment. They offered 2 week severance if I signed an NDA so tight it could choke a whale. I refused. They cut it to 1 week. I still refused. So they walked me out, past my team, past the glass-walled offices where people who'd laughed with me at happy hours now stared at their keyboards like statues, and handed me my coat like I was contagious. The security guard held my elbow the whole way to the elevator. Not roughly, just firmly, like I might snap and start deleting servers or something. I didn't cry until I was on the L, pressed against the window, watching the Viridian Tower shrink behind me. My hands shook. Not from anger, not yet, but from disbelief. How could something so wrong feel so effortless to them? For a week I drifted. Ate cold pizza. Watched rain streak my apartment window. Deleted LinkedIn. Then, late one night, staring at the ceiling, I remembered something my mother used to say when I came home from school crying because some kid stole my lunch money. "Honey, you can't fight dirty with clean hands. But you can make them wish they played fair." I sat up. I still had copies. Not just the code snippets, but emails, meeting notes, even a Slack thread where Martin jokingly referred to the backdoor as our little tax break for patriotism. I backed everything up to an encrypted drive I kept in a safety deposit box, habit from working in data security. Not because I planned to leak it, just because I'd learned early. Trust, but verify. But leaking it wouldn't be enough. Viridian had lawyers who could spin, bury, or smear anything. They'd call me disgruntled, unstable, a failed employee lashing out. The media would yawn. The regulators would file it under pending, and Martin would still be sipping single malt in his corner office, smirking over my ruin. No. If I was going to do this, I needed to checkmate him. Not damage him. End him. I spent the next 10 days in monk-like focus. I mapped every stakeholder Viridian cared about. Investors, clients, board members, even the senators whose campaigns they greased. I studied their public statements, their values pages, their pet causes. I learned who prided themselves on ESG scores, who built their brand on ethical tech, who just lost a child to a flood in a region Viridian had downgraded. Then I drafted a letter. Not a rant. Not an exposé. A letter. Personal, precise, devastatingly polite. I addressed it to 23 individuals, each one hand-selected. I didn't accuse Viridian of malice. I framed it as a regrettable deviation from shared values. I included only enough evidence to prove the flaw without overwhelming them with jargon. And I ended each letter the same way. I believe you care about doing what's right. I also believe you deserve the truth before your name is tied to consequences you never intended. I signed it. Mirabelle Hayes. Former lead, Ethical AI Integration. Viridian Dynamics. Terminated without cause. October 28, 2025. I printed each letter on crisp, cream-colored paper. Sealed each in a matching envelope. Paid for overnight delivery with the last of my savings. Then I waited. The first ripple came fast. 3 days later, Senator Diane Rojas, the one whose campaign had benefited from the manipulated risk reports, issued a public statement expressing concern about Viridian's practices and called for an independent audit. Rojas was up for re-election in a purple state. She couldn't afford to look cozy with a company rigging disaster data. Viridian's stock dipped 4%. Then came the client, the mayor of Portland, Oregon, a city Viridian had rated low risk despite NOAA warnings, announced they were suspending their $12 million contract pending investigation. Her press release quoted my letter almost verbatim. Another 7% drop. Martin called me. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew his voice the second he said, "Mirabelle, we need to talk." I let it ring once, twice, then answered, "Hello, Martin." "Look," he said, skipping pleasantries, voice tight. "Whatever you think you're accomplishing, it's overkill. You've made your point. Come in. We'll negotiate. Severance. A reference. A clean exit." I sat on my fire escape, autumn wind biting through my sweater. "I don't want your money, Martin. I don't want your reference. I want you to understand why you're losing everything." A pause. Then, low and venomous, "You'll regret this." I hung up. That night, I got an email from someone I didn't know, a junior analyst at Viridian named Theo. He'd seen the internal panic, watched Martin scream at his VP of legal in the hallway. "They're scrambling," Theo wrote, "trying to contain it. But your letter, it's like you handed each person exactly the knife they needed to cut Viridian's throat without getting blood on their hands." I smiled for the first time in weeks, but the real blow came a week later. The New York Times published a front-page piece, Viridian Dynamics accused of manipulating climate risk data for political gain. It quoted 3 of my recipients, 2 investors who'd pulled funding, and a former board member who called the practice a betrayal of public trust. Embedded in the article was a redacted copy of my letter. Not the whole thing. Just enough to show its tone, its precision, its quiet fury. Viridian's stock plummeted 32% in a single day. Martin didn't come to work the next morning. But I wasn't done. Because while the world saw a whistleblower bringing down a corrupt corporation, I saw something else, a pattern. Martin hadn't acted alone. He'd been enabled by a culture that rewarded silence, that valued optics over ethics, that treated integrity as a marketing slogan rather than a standard. And if I stopped now, someone else would rise in his place, just as slick, just as ruthless, just as sure that the rules didn't apply to them. So I kept digging, not just into Viridian's past projects, but into Martin's. His resume was glossy, MBA from Kellogg, stints at 2 other major firms before Viridian. But I found gaps, quiet exits, lawsuits buried in sealed court records. One from a junior developer at his last company who'd raised concerns about biased hiring algorithms. She'd vanished from the industry after settling. I tracked her down. Her name was Lena Cho. She lived in Albuquerque now, running a small coding boot camp for women of color. We spoke on the phone for an hour. She didn't want to relitigate her trauma. But when I told her what Martin had done to me and what Viridian had done to communities facing climate collapse, something shifted in her voice. "What do you need?" she asked. "Confirmation," I said. "And courage." She sent me documents, emails, performance reviews that showed her sudden underperformance after she'd spoken up. It was the same playbook. Isolate, discredit, expel. I added her story to a new letter. This one wasn't for investors or politicians. This one was for the press. Not just the Times, but ProPublica, The Guardian, TechCrunch, anyone who'd listen. And this time I didn't hold back. I named names. I showed the pattern. I connected the dots between Martin's career and a trail of silenced voices. But even as I hit send, a cold thought settled in my chest. What happens after the checkmate? I'd spent weeks crafting this perfect revenge, clean, surgical, morally justified. But revenge, even when it's called justice, doesn't fill the hole it leaves behind. My savings were gone. My resume now had a gap labeled terminated. And no matter how satisfying it was to watch Martin's empire crumble, I still woke up some nights gasping from dreams where I was back in that conference room, signing away my dignity for a paycheck. I needed more than his downfall. I needed to build something real. So while the news cycle chewed on Viridian's scandal, I started something quiet. I reached out to Lena, to Theo, to 3 other former Viridian employees who'd messaged me after the Times piece, saying, that was me too. We met over Zoom, wary at first, then fierce. We shared stories, strategies, scars, and we began designing something new. Not just another startup, not just another platform, but a cooperative, a worker-owned tech collective built on radical transparency, where ethical reviews weren't a department you could shut down, but baked into every line of code, where whistleblowers weren't fired but protected, where integrity wasn't stitched into a rug but coded into the DNA. We called it Axiom Labs. It was barely a name in a Google document, but it was mine, ours. Martin finally surfaced a week ago. He gave an interview to Bloomberg, trying to spin the scandal as rogue elements and misinterpreted data. He looked older, tired. His silver hair was mussed, his suit slightly rumpled, the first time I'd ever seen him less than immaculate. The reporter asked him about me. He paused, then said carefully, Ms. Hayes was a talented employee. Misguided, but talented. Viridian regrets the misunderstanding. I laughed out loud. A real, full laugh that startled my cat off the couch. He still didn't get it. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a reckoning. But here's the thing no one tells you about checkmates. The game doesn't end when the king falls. It ends when you decide what to build on the empty board. And I'm just getting started. The fallout from Viridian's collapse moved faster than I dared hope. Within 2 months, the Department of Justice opened a formal investigation. 3 major clients sued for fraud. Martin Croft resigned to pursue other opportunities, corporate speak for being dragged out with his reputation in tatters. I saw a paparazzi photo of him leaving his downtown condo, head down, briefcase in hand, looking like a man who just realized the world had stopped pretending to admire him. But I didn't gloat. Not anymore. Because while Viridian burned, Axiom Labs rose, quietly, steadily, like dawn after a long night. Lena Cho moved back east. Theo quit Viridian the day after Martin's resignation and joined us full-time. We pooled our severance, our savings, even a small grant from a digital rights nonprofit that had read my letters and called them a masterclass in ethical resistance. We rented a shared workspace in a converted warehouse in Pilsen, painted the walls white, and filled them with sticky notes full of code, mission statements, and hand-drawn flowcharts of our values. Our first project wasn't flashy. It was a public dashboard for air quality data in underserved neighborhoods, built with open-source tools, audited by community groups, and designed so even a kid on a cracked smartphone could understand if their school was in a pollution hotspot. We launched it on a Tuesday. By Friday, it was being used by teachers in Detroit, pastors in Houston, and a group of high school students in Newark who'd built their own sensor network and plugged it right into our API. No one paid us, but people thanked us. Real thanks. The kind that doesn't come with a bonus or a promotion, but with tears in someone's eyes because you helped them protect their child. That was worth more than Viridian's entire stock portfolio. 6 months in, something unexpected happened. An investor reached out. Not a shark in a suit looking to flip us in 18 months, but Dr. Amara Finch, a former climate scientist turned impact investor who'd read the Times piece and tracked me down. She didn't want equity. She wanted partnership. She offered seed funding with one condition: that workers owned at least 51% of Axiom, forever. We said yes. With her backing, we hired 8 more people, all from backgrounds Viridian would have filtered out. A single dad who'd coded while working night shifts at a warehouse, a trans woman who'd been pushed out of Silicon Valley for not fitting the culture, a veteran who taught herself machine learning to process PTSD therapy data. We paid fair wages, offered mental health days, held monthly truth circles where anyone could call out bias, burnout, or broken promises without fear. It wasn't perfect. We argued. We missed deadlines. We spilled coffee on servers. But we never lied to each other. And we never lied to the public. One afternoon, about a year after I'd mailed those letters, I stood on the fire escape of our new office, the one with real windows and a view of the Chicago River, and watched the sun set over the skyline. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Lena. The mayor of Baltimore just signed a contract with us. $2.1 million. They're using our flood risk model to redesign their entire emergency response system. You did this, Mirabelle. I typed back, we did this. And I meant it. Later that week, I got a certified letter. Not from a lawyer. From the U.S. Office of the Whistleblower. They were awarding me a confidential settlement. 7% of the fines Viridian would pay for defrauding federal grant programs tied to climate resilience. The number made my hands shake. Enough to pay off my mom's medical debt. Enough to buy her a little house near Lake Erie with a porch and a garden. Enough to fund Axiom's next 3 years, no strings attached. I called her that night. Mom, I said, voice thick, remember when you told me to make them wish they played fair? She laughed, soft and warm. Oh, baby, I always knew you would. I didn't go back to Viridian's ruins. I didn't need to. My victory wasn't in their ashes. It was in the thing we were building from the ground up, with clean hands and clear eyes. 2 years after I was fired, Axiom Labs was named one of Fast Company's most innovative social enterprises. The article called us the antidote to Silicon Valley's soullessness. I didn't care about the headline. What mattered was the photo they ran. Our team, arms slung over each other's shoulders, laughing in front of a whiteboard covered in equations and doodles of cats wearing lab coats. And me, Mirabelle Hayes, in the center, not hiding, not apologizing, just present. Whole. Martin Croft faded into obscurity. Last I heard, he was consulting for a crypto startup in Dubai. Ironic, since they'd probably vanish in a puff of smoke by next spring. But I don't track him anymore. His shadow doesn't stretch this far. Because here's what I learned. Justice isn't just about tearing down the wicked. It's about planting something so good in their place that no one misses the rot. Now, when I walk into our office each morning, I don't see a company. I see a promise kept. To my younger self, to my mother, to every person told their ethics were a liability. We built a place where doing the right thing isn't a risk. It's the business model. And sometimes, late at night, when the servers hum and the city sleeps, I pull out that old leather satchel, the one I carried into Viridian with such hope, and I smile. Because this time, the future didn't betray me. I built it myself. Chess pawn.